As we mentioned last week, we ran a little bit long in our conversation with Caleb Spitler. This is part two of a two-part conversation. If you missed last week, go back, see part one. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without further ado, we'll get right into our conversation, part two of Caleb Spitler.
So if you can show your team, here's how we're actually helping people, I think that does go a long way to people feeling a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in their work.
Yeah, that's the old kind of start with why and some of those sort of really well-researched, science-backed conversations around that. And speaking of well-researched and science-backed books, earlier when I said sales, I kind of threw in air quotes, and I'm thinking of Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called To Sell is Human. And the premise of that book is it doesn't matter what job you're in, right? So for our listeners that are in human resources, maybe you're selling the employee population on enrollment in the 401k, or a doctor is selling his or her patient on getting rid of smoking or dietary changes. So we all have this kind of need to talk to fellow humans and to say, hey, look, this is a reality. So when you're talking about the burnout and in sales teams, I think that's relevant for HR professionals listening to say, hey, look, this is across all of the different people, maybe even specifically in your sales department. So if you've got some turnover and you're worried about recruitment retention, some of these ideas are really, really good ideas. That being said, I know more recently you've transitioned into speaking about communication in general. So we've talked about a few ideas that might be worth communicating, but even just the art of communication and some of the talks that you've been giving more recently, I'd be curious to have you kind of pivot with me down this rabbit hole of, Caleb's thoughts on communication.
I love communication. Since I was a little kid, I just
Somewhere your
think
wife's in the background nodding, right?
that's
Yeah,
right.
he doesn't stop. Yeah.
Well, not just me communicating, but I love the art and the science of communication. I went to school for communication. I love speaking. I love speaking on burnout, but I like speaking on lots of things. And so the more people would hear me speak as a speaker, they might say, hey, I love that you speak on burnout. I feel like I have a message to share on leadership, or I want to sell my products and services. How do I land a talk? How do I write a talk? How do I deliver it in a way that's impactful? How can I use the stage to convert products and services? And so, that is a whole art and science, but it is so fulfilling. Of course, the classic Warren Buffett quote about you want to make yourself 50% more valuable, improve your communication skills. To me, again, I worked with juvenile delinquents. I was making $28,000 a year helping youth. And when I started recognizing, wow, I have this ability to communicate, it was like the world opened up to me. I've been able to get in rooms where I'm speaking in front of all these people that are far wealthier than me, far more influential than me, have amazing networks. And I'm thinking, how am I the one standing at the front of the room right now in front of this amazing network of people? And so, man, if there's one skill that I would love people to focus in on 2024, it's your ability to communicate. And so a lot of my talks, like I said, I do still do some burnout stuff, but I've really started to focus in helping people get their message out there. So whether you want to make an impact with your message or you want to use the stage to close deals, that's something that I'm really enjoying helping other people come into.
And so let's talk about the person who's listening to this right now. It's like, yes, thank you. I have something I need to communicate. Some additional efficacy would be great, man. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, I think the mindset behind it, whether you're selling or whether you want to get more speaking engagements, you have to knock it out of the park when you get a speaking engagement. So if I gave you 10 speaking engagements right now and you did what most speakers do, which is give a 7 or 8 out of 10 talk, they'll say, hey, that was really good. Thanks for coming. You're a really great speaker. And everybody will tell you nice things because that's what people do. They tell you nice things when you get done speaking.
We all know that person that got the haircut and you're walking around with them and everyone notices the haircut. They say, hey, did you get your haircut? I love it. And you know darn well that ain't a good haircut, but they notice the haircut and they have to make a comment. So the comment is always, I love it.
That's right. That's right. So most people I talk to, they say, hey, Caleb, I'm a good speaker. I just need to learn how to land more speaking engagements. Or I'm a good speaker, but I just need to learn how to sell my products and services from the stage. And I like to kind of back them up a step and say, Are you a good speaker or are you a knock their socks off speaker? So
Yep.
it's a huge difference between somebody saying, yeah, I heard Toby speak. He's good. Yeah, really good, actually. Some helpful tips and tricks. Or someone coming away and saying, oh my goodness, Toby is the best speaker we've had in the last 5 years. Our people need this. Toby, what's it going to take for me to come get you to speak for our people? If you can turn one speaking engagement into two and those two into another two, you can build a speaking empire just by speaking. Speaking is the referral business. There's no other business that's more referral based than speaking. And so, again, I think people just think, show me the sales strategy to get on stages. And I think if you put 90% of your efforts into making a truly great talk, again, even with your products and services, judge you based on the free stuff you give away. Right now, hopefully I'm providing great value.
Yeah.
And if I do, maybe people will say, wow, this is what he did on a 15-minute podcast. What can he do if I go deeper and do more work with him? So you have to knock their socks off on the front end. And that's going to be the thing that gets you more speaking engagements.
Well, and what I love about what you're saying and how it can apply broadly, especially to our audience, is if you're given an opportunity to be given a microphone in people's ears, focus on taking, even if you were a 7 or an 8, taking that to a knock your socks off moment. So again, circling back to, an HR professional that maybe operations says, hey, we've got an all staff meeting. I'm going to give you 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the meeting to talk about company culture or talk about, enrollment and the benefits or whatever the case is. Communication in general is such an art. And as you said, it's really just imparting information, but it can be done to such a wide degree of efficiency and efficacy that I think just the idea and the premise of taking seriously the moments you're given to speak, because I'll tell you, I do open enrollment meetings for my clients, and there is a difference. Like I have my clients go, look, I need you out, you come back, because when you communicate the benefits well, the employees understand them more, they get it better, there's more appreciation, right? So I think that, this idea of communicating well is so important.
Absolutely. That's it right there. You got it.
From a guy that has studied this and speaks on this, do you have any, not to make you the Toastmasters, online Zoom coach, but what are some of the things you see that are kind of maybe low hanging fruit or high impact things for folks to keep in mind if they just came to you and said, look, man, I'm so glad I have your ear real quick because I was given XYZ speaking engagement and I want it to go well. Make sure that I do what?
Perfect. So what I would do is start a notes in your phone, and I would put 3 categories in this notes that you're going to put on your phone. First category is credibility. Second category is emotional appeal. Third category is logical appeal. And all day, every day, as you're going throughout your day and you find something funny happens, I will pull out my phone. I'll put that under my emotional appeal. So what are the things in my speech that are illustrations, they're funny stories, they're humor, they make people laugh, they make people cry? I have a whole list of stories that I can go back to because I want my speeches to have an emotional appeal. Every time you hear a statistic or you read a study or something interesting, you open your phone and you say, okay, statistic on company culture that I heard. I have a whole list of things that are logical appeals for people. Anytime something cool happens where I get to, train a famous athlete or something, I might write that in my credibility statements. So those are really, comes back to Aristotle. This is, he's the kind of king of public speaking, at least in my mind. People need to know that you are the expert. You have to establish your credibility. People need to logically understand that what you're saying is true, and people need to feel it. If you miss any one of those 3 things, your speech is destroyed. There's 100 different ways to structure a speech. There's so many different ways to deliver a speech. There's so many different speaking styles. But if you don't have credibility, if you don't speak to the mind and you don't speak to the heart, you are going to leave some money on the table. So those are the things that I focus on. I've coached so many different speakers with completely different styles. I don't really care too much about your style, your tempo, if you put your hands in your pockets, whatnot. What I really care is, do however you come across. Does it establish your credibility? Does it speak to their mind? And does it speak to their heart?
And I love that what you're doing in an act of humility is to say, look, I am hearing you, Toby, call me the expert. And yes, I've looked into a lot of this stuff, but a bit like when people ask you about how to lose weight and you tell them it's diet and exercise, right? It isn't a hack. You're talking about several thousand-year-old wisdom that is still true today. And the reason that's true is human beings were communicators and storytellers, for in all time. And so we have this kind of ingrained into us to have the ability to move people when done right. And it speaks to us at a core level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then just simply solve problems for people. Yeah. If you can, I hate the webinars. If you've ever joined a webinar where they say, we're going to show you how to do this, and then they just sales pitch you for 45 minutes. We live in the world of free samples now. So the way you get business, at least in my mind, is give some value on the front end. It's give first. So if I can articulate their pain to them, then I've been given the right to give them the solution. So if I go to the doctor, you can cut me off if we're short on time, but
no, we're good, man. I'm loving this because what you're getting at, in my opinion, I don't mean to jump in, but everybody listens on WeFM, right? What's in it for me? And so when you're delivering a message, you want to be tuned to the frequency they're tuned at. So, when you're a human resource professional that's trying to tell people about a new system, a new HRIS system that we've moved to, and everyone's going to think it's a huge headache, but what you can speak to is how much easier they can punch in the clock, or how much quicker they get paid, or kind of, like you said, establishing something that's for them, right? You're giving to them first. That can help establish a listener. Is that kind of where we're going?
Absolutely. Yeah. I popped a rib out of my back like maybe a month and a half ago, and I went to the first chiropractor, and they didn't even ask me any questions. She just started like popping stuff and moving stuff. Yeah. And I was like, do you know what you're doing? Because you don't even know where my pain is yet. Yeah. So I went to a different chiropractor, and he felt around and he said, oh, I can feel it. Is it right here? And I said, that's exactly where my pain is. And he says, and does it shoot down your spine when you move like this? And I said, that's exactly how it is. And he said, and then, in the middle of the night, do you kind of wake up with this kind of stiffness? And I said, that's exactly what my pain is. So by the time he went to recommend a solution, because he had articulated my pain to me in detail, I said, you're the person I want working on me because I trust that you understand my pain. I remember, I'll never forget a HubSpot article I read. It said the number one reason that people buy is because they feel understood. Yeah. So the biggest credibility of all is not that I've coached XYZ person. The biggest credibility of all is if I can describe your pain in detail to you and you say, oh my goodness, Caleb, you just described to me exactly the pain I'm in. Now I've earned the right to give you a solution. And if I can give you one solution, let's say on a podcast like this, I can make you a little bit of a better speaker. Then you come back and say, well, you solved this for me for free. What are all the other things that you solve? And you say, I'm so glad you asked. Here's how we can work together. So that is, I believe in solving problems for people. Again, nothing I've said here today is like, what? I've never heard this before, but it is the basics that trip people up.
Yeah, I think that, it is these fundamentals, and I don't mind, and I will die on this hill, but continuing to revisit and give airtime to the importance of the fundamentals. And I'll close it with my thought on what you're saying as far as presenting for the other person in a way that makes them want to listen to the rest of the stuff you have to say. You need to back all that up, because communication and being able to do that starts with listening, which is a skill set in and of itself. And if you aren't able to listen to your people, your population, the department you're about to speak to, the CEO you're about to pitch to, if you haven't heard what they perceive to be their issues, chances are you're not going to repackage it correctly back to them. And you're going to miss this opportunity that Caleb's talking about as a very important first step to whatever the heck else is about to come out of your mouth going into their ears.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, I appreciate you so much, from the TEDx stage to the HIP podcast to all the things you've done in between. We've let people know how to get a hold of Caleb. We'll drop his information again right here on the screen for you. I just think that these sorts of talks are what really invigorate workforces and departments and executive teams and leadership teams. And so having you on, I'm really, really grateful for, man.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, it's such an honor to be here.
I appreciate you. That is all the time we have for you this week on the HIT Podcast. Join us next week, Tuesday. Join us every Tuesday. And until next week, make this the best week yet.